All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Today we're going to do coffee, a few different things with coffee. I'm a coffee addict. There's no question about that. Thankfully, it's a socially acceptable addiction, and everyone seems to understand. Now, I roast my own coffee, and I don't do that because I'm a coffee snob or because it just tastes so much better or whatever. It does taste better than pre-roasted, pre-ground coffee because it's fresh. But I don't do it for that reason. I do it because I live in China, and it's really hard to get coffee, decent coffee, for a reasonable price in China. I can get unroasted, cheap beans grown right here in China in Yunnan province for about 10% what I pay for Starbucks beans, and I can roast them myself so they're not burnt. Okay, so all you need to roast, there's lots of different ways you can roast coffee beans. You can get a air roaster, you can get a rotisserie roaster, you know, automatic roasters, those are all pretty expensive. What I do is I just use a really thick cast iron pan, and I use this for my cooling tray. Once you've roasted the beans, they're very, very hot. You need to spread them out so that they can cool off quickly, so they don't continue to roast too long after you stop them. This is what I use. You can use anything that'll stand up to the heat. And there's a lot of heat. So speaking of which, let's get that going. You're going to want to get your pan up to it like at least 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's about, I think, 240, 260 in there somewhere, Celsius, which is very, very hot. And you want to get it up to temperature before you put the beans in. So we'll let that go for a little bit. I am actually running low on roasted beans, so it's time to top up the supply a little bit here. So I'll show you how to roast and sort of what to pay attention to. If you can roast by hand manually, you can roast more effectively with any other method you want to use. So this is a good, even if you never actually roast by hand, and if you can make a fairly effective coffee bean roaster out of a popcorn popper, one of those air poppers, and a little bit of DIY. So there's really no reason to do it this way if you don't want to. I prefer it this way just because I'm used to it, I guess, or because it's simpler and I don't have to actually make something to roast my beans. But all right, that's getting up there. The reason you want a really thick pan, by the way, and cast iron is better than aluminum or whatever else you might get, is because it holds the heat better. It heats up a little bit slower, I guess, than something thinner, but it'll hold the heat better and it distributes the heat better, and it'll stand up to the high temperatures you're using a lot better than a thinner pan will. So I'm not going to roast a whole lot today. I've found that my limit with this size of a pan is about 2 pounds of beans, about a kilo of beans at a time, and that's probably twice as much as this, maybe 3 times as much as this. I don't roast that much at one time generally because I don't need to. I roast 2 or 3 times a week, and that's good enough for me. All right, so once the beans go in, you need to keep them moving. If they sit too long, they'll scorch, burn. And if you like Starbucks coffee, that's maybe not a bad thing, but I prefer my beans not burnt, so keep them moving. Now, doing this in an open pan like this, it's going to produce quite a lot of smoke. You want to do this somewhere that's well ventilated, either outside in your backyard or on your deck or your balcony or whatever, on a gas burner, or if you have a powerful enough hot plate, I guess a hot plate would work, or near a very open window, I suppose. Or in my case, I'm going to turn on the vent here. And I don't know how loud that's going to be in the video. I don't know how much my microphone's going to pick that up. So if you can't hear me for the next little bit, you have my apologies. But I do need to turn that on. So I'm going to do that now. There we go. And I guess we'll find out if that interferes too much with the audio on my video. So this is going to take probably about 10 minutes altogether to get them to where I want them. And then I don't know if you can see I'm not sure if it's picking up the color or not, but some of the beans are starting to darken a little bit already, just turn like a nice tanned, light brown color. These beans they're picked, they're not technically beans actually, they're seeds, but the fruit that grows around them is peeled off, and then they're sun-dried until most of the moisture is out of them. And like this, they can store for years, I guess. They're not quite as fresh second year or third year, but they're still good. So a couple years ago, I bought 50 kilos of beans. That's a little over 100 pounds of beans, 120 pounds of beans or so at once, when my supplier was trying to get rid of some of his older stock. And they lasted me for a year and a half or so, I think, and they were fine the whole time. They didn't suffer from being stored. You want to keep them in a dry place, dark, dry, cool environment, standard stuff. Yeah, so as they're roasting, they're caramelizing it. That's why you want the high temperature. That's what gives them the color and that roasted flavor. Dry roast, of course, you don't put any oil or water or anything in there. In fact, you want to avoid water because that'll boil them rather than roast them. And this is basically it. Now, there are two benchmarks as you go through the roasting process: first crack and second crack. As they roast, eventually the beans will start to crack as whatever gases, whatever liquid there is inside expands into gas and cracks the bean open. I mean, there are two times this happens: first crack and second crack. First crack is basically anytime after that you can stop roasting, and if you like a really light roast, that's when you would stop roasting. They won't look much different. They certainly won't look like a typical roasted coffee you'd buy in the store at that point. If you let them go longer, eventually they'll hit second crack, and you don't want to go much past second crack. Even if you like a dark roast, like a French roast or an espresso roast, you don't want to go too far past second crack. Once you get to second crack, if you're going past second crack, well, you can hear them starting to crack a little bit now. This is first crack. We're getting to first crack. Once you get to second crack, keep your eye open for the beans starting to turn shiny. They'll be fairly dark by that point, and if they start to get shiny, that's the oils in the beans coming out. You don't want the oils to come out because the oils are what gives coffee its flavor. Once they start turning shiny, you've probably over roasted them. So as you get used to roasting, you get a feel for where you want it. And sound is important. You can hear them cracking. But smell is also very important too. I could probably, aside from burning myself, I could probably roast coffee with my eyes closed or blindfolded or something by now, just from smell. And know when to stop and what have you. So yeah, this is it. Just keep the beans moving. Keep an eye on them some of them are actually staying on the bottom too long. I can see a couple of really dark ones already, and the rest are not. So, a word of advice as well. If you're thinking that it might be easier to give it one of these and just toss it, you'll see that's why you don't do that. It spreads this chaff all over the place, and then your significant other gets angry with you and shouts and brandishes things. So, if you're going to do this indoors, you probably want to just stick with the old wooden spoon method. As you can see, my wooden spoon has seen a lot of use. Been using this spoon for about 5 or 6 years now, roasting coffee. It used to be a whole spoon. Or spatula, whatever. It used to be a different color too. That's all coffee oil. If you were to suck on this for 5 or 10 minutes, you probably overdose on caffeine and die. Alright, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit here until it says ready to go, but keep an eye on the color and watch how it's changing as we go along. Okay, so once the smoke starts to sort of get in the way of being able to see the beans, Just blow on it a little bit, clear the smoke, and take a look. That's usually when it's time to stop roasting. At least the way I like my beans. So you just pour them, dump them into the cooling tray, spread them out a little bit so that they can cool evenly, and let them sit till they're cool. And that's all there is to it. Of course, if you got whole bean coffee, you'll want a grinder. I'm going to grind this up in a moment, and I'll show you how to make iced coffee, which is, well, I'll show you my way to make iced coffee, which is to cold brew the coffee in the fridge for a day or two, and that way you don't have to water it down with ice. So, yeah, you see, I don't know if you can see in the video or not, but the beans are actually fairly shiny, which means I've probably roasted them longer than I should have. Oh well, still tastes good. Cool. So once they're cool, we'll grind them up, and I'll show you how to make the iced coffee. Okay, so basically, and this is the easiest thing in the world. To make iced coffee, you put your coffee grounds in there. I'm only going to put, I think, 4 scoops in there for now. Yeah, I would usually put more in there. I mean, it depends on how strong you like your iced coffee and how long you plan to leave it soak. I'm willing to let this sit for a couple of days, so I'm going to put less in. And then you just fill it up with drinking water. Give it a little swirl as it's going there. Get the coffee grounds in the water. And this is basically, you fill it up with water, and then you put it in the fridge for a day or 2 or 3, and you're done. Once you're happy with how strong it is, once it's been sitting long enough, you strain the grounds out. And once this is ready, I'll show you how to do that. And then you're good to go. Nice, delicious iced coffee. The way a lot of people make iced coffee is they brew coffee and then they put ice cubes in it, or they put hot coffee in the fridge. And I mean, hot coffee in the fridge is okay. You're not watering down your coffee, at least. But when you brew coffee hot, you are breaking down some of the flavor oils, and it doesn't taste the same. It doesn't taste as good as it does if you cold brew it. So by doing it this way and being a little bit patient, you get the full flavor of the coffee. And if you haven't ever had cold brew coffee, you're in for a treat. It is a wonderful thing. You can do this with tea as well, by the way. My favorite to do it with is Earl Grey, because you can, when you cold brew Earl Grey in the fridge for a couple of days, you can really taste the bergamot, and well, you can taste things in the tea that you never thought or never really knew were in there. So, depending on how well it mixed when you swirl, you can take a chopstick or a spoon or something and give it a stir. But usually that's okay. And then put it in the fridge. And I'll see you again when this is ready. Okay, now that the coffee has soaked in the cold water in the fridge for about a day, I think it's been about 24 hours now, what we want to do is strain out all of the coffee grounds from the coffee. We don't want to drink that. So what I use is it's a cheesecloth. It's a synthetic cheesecloth sock. I don't know what else to call it. You can use this. I use this for yogurt. I use this for coffee. Anything you want to strain out. I guess soups, if you wanted to make a broth and strain out all the spices and stuff, that would work as well. So, now I'm not too worried about getting all the little drips and drops in the bottom there. This is going to be plenty of coffee for me anyway, iced coffee. So, what I then do is I take the same jug, I rinse out all the coffee grounds from it. Most of the coffee grounds anyway. And this is the tricky bit. Now, I use this bowl, 1, because it's big enough, and 2, because I can actually kind of squish it a little bit, which makes it easier to pour. But you kind of gotta go for it and hope for the best. I don't always get it all in there. I could use a funnel. I have a funnel. I just don't like to try and find it every time I do this. So, it's not necessarily a bad thing to make a mess as long as you're prepared to clean it up. That's my motto. So, that's basically it. That's how you make iced coffee. As I said, I'm pretty much a die-hard coffee junkie. And I have a small glass of this in the morning before I go to work. I don't usually make coffee at home during the week. I wait till I get to work. But I do like to have a little jolt in the morning before I drive off. So, iced coffee. I think I'll have a little bit right now, even though it's probably way too late for this. Delicious. All right. If you try this at home, let me know how it goes. What's your favorite roast of coffee to use for iced coffee? My favorite is whatever I happen to have. Haha. All right, I'll see you next time. Have fun cooking.